An audio leak out of the Cleveland Browns locker room just shook the entire NFL. A teammate allegedly wished harm on rookie quarterback Shedeur Sanders during a play. Fans are furious, the internet is exploding, and questions are everywhere. What really happened inside Cleveland, and why did everything suddenly change? When Shedeur Sanders stepped into the offense for the Cleveland Browns, the expectation was simple: develop the young quarterback, give him protection, and slowly build momentum. But almost immediately, things around him began to look unstable. The biggest problem wasn't the playbook or the receivers, it was the offensive line. At one point, the Browns were facing a situation that almost never happens in the NFL: the possibility of replacing all 5 starting offensive linemen. In a league where chemistry on the offensive line is everything, that kind of instability can completely derail an offense before it even has a chance to find rhythm. Think about it like this. An offensive line isn't just 5 big players blocking defenders. It's a coordinated unit that has to communicate, adjust protections, and react instantly to defensive schemes. Every snap requires perfect timing. If just one player misses an assignment, the entire pocket can collapse in seconds. And early in the season, that's exactly what kept happening. Plays that should have developed cleanly were suddenly falling apart. Pass rushers were getting through untouched. Pressure was arriving almost immediately after the snap. Sometimes it looked like the pocket collapsed before Sanders even finished his drop back. For a young quarterback, that kind of environment can be brutal. Instead of calmly scanning the field, the quarterback is forced into survival mode. Reads become rushed, timing routes fall apart. The offense starts playing reactionary football instead of executing the game plan. Fans watching the game started noticing the pattern quickly. Missed blocks, confused assignments, protection breakdowns at the worst possible moments. It didn't just look like normal mistakes, it looked like an offensive line struggling to function as a unit. And when that happens, the quarterback usually gets blamed first. Across sports media, some analysts began questioning whether Sanders was ready for the speed of the NFL. Was he holding the ball too long? Was he struggling to read defenses? Was the offense simply too complex? But when fans started rewatching the film, a different story appeared. The problem wasn't always the quarterback. Many times the pocket simply wasn't there. Instead of stepping into clean throwing lanes, Sanders was dodging defenders almost immediately after the snap. Defensive linemen were breaking through gaps that should have been sealed. Protection calls looked confused, and drives that had potential were ending before they even got started. It created a strange situation where the offense looked chaotic from the outside. But inside the building, the coaching staff eventually realized something important. If the Browns wanted their young quarterback to succeed, the entire foundation of the offense had to change. As the struggles continued for the Cleveland Browns offense, something interesting started happening outside the stadium. Fans weren't just watching the games anymore, they were studying them. Clips began circulating across social media. Slow-motion breakdowns appeared online. Frame-by-frame analysis started popping up in fan forums and football discussion channels. People kept asking the same question about Shedeur Sanders: was the quarterback really the problem? The more people looked at the film, the more confusing the narrative became. On live broadcasts, the plays often looked like typical offensive struggles. The pocket collapsed, Sanders scrambled, or the play ended with pressure forcing a quick throw. But when fans slowed those same moments down, they started noticing details that were easy to miss in real time. Blocks arriving late. Protection assignments getting crossed. Defenders slipping through gaps that should have been sealed. In several clips, pass rushers reached the quarterback almost instantly, sometimes within seconds of the snap. That kind of pressure makes it nearly impossible for any quarterback to run a normal offense. Even the best players in the league need time for routes to develop. Receivers have to run 10, 15, sometimes 20 yards before a play fully opens up. But if the pocket collapses immediately, the quarterback never even gets the chance to reach his second or third read. That's the situation many fans started noticing around Sanders. On certain drives, he would take the snap, begin his drop back, and already have defenders closing in from multiple directions. Instead of calmly stepping forward to throw, he had to pivot, sidestep, or rush a decision just to avoid taking a hit. And once viewers began noticing the pattern, it became impossible to ignore. The same types of breakdowns kept appearing again and again. One lineman would miss an assignment, another would get pushed backward into the pocket. Sometimes two defenders would break through the line at the same time. Plays that should have taken 5 seconds to develop were collapsing in 2. That kind of pressure doesn't just disrupt one play, it affects the entire rhythm of the offense. Quarterbacks start anticipating pressure even when it isn't there. Footwork becomes rushed, timing with receivers starts to drift. Confidence can slowly erode if the chaos continues long enough. But what surprised many fans was how Shedeur Sanders responded. Instead of panicking, he kept competing. Even while dodging defenders and absorbing hits, he still managed to deliver tight window throws and keep certain drives alive. The more people analyzed the tape, the more they realized something important. The chaos around him was real. But despite all of it, the young quarterback kept finding ways to produce, and that realization started changing the entire conversation around Cleveland's offense. While the chaos continued around the Cleveland Browns' offense, one part of the story kept surprising people: the way Shedeur Sanders responded to it. Most rookie quarterbacks struggle when everything around them starts breaking down. When the pocket collapses constantly and protection becomes unreliable, confidence can disappear quickly. Many young players start forcing throws, rushing decisions, or simply losing their rhythm within the offense. But Sanders didn't respond that way. Instead of folding under pressure, he started adapting. Every week, fans noticed small adjustments in his game. His footwork became quicker. His awareness inside the pocket improved. When defenders burst through the line, he began sliding away from pressure instead of panicking. Sometimes it was just a small step to the side. Other times it was a quick pivot to avoid a sack before firing a pass downfield. Those little moments started adding up. Even when the pocket collapsed earlier than expected, Sanders kept his eyes downfield. Instead of immediately scrambling, he searched for receivers breaking open in tight windows. Several plays that looked doomed at the snap suddenly turned into positive gains because he managed to stay calm long enough to deliver the ball. That type of composure is rare for a young quarterback. In the NFL, the difference between success and failure often comes down to how players handle chaos. Defenses are faster, smarter, and more aggressive than anything players see in college. When pressure arrives unexpectedly, quarterbacks either panic or prove they belong. Again and again, Sanders chose the second option. There were moments during games when defenders closed in from both sides, forcing him to release the ball with almost no time to think. Yet somehow the pass would still land exactly where it needed to be. Tight window throws slipped between defenders. Third down conversions kept drives alive. Those were the plays that began shifting the narrative. At the beginning of the season, critics questioned whether Sanders was ready for the NFL spotlight. But the more he kept producing under difficult circumstances, the harder those doubts became to defend. Fans watching closely could see what was happening. The young quarterback wasn't playing in perfect conditions. He wasn't surrounded by flawless protection or a fully synchronized offense. In fact, many of his best plays came while dealing with constant pressure and unpredictable breakdowns around him. Yet he kept delivering. Every accurate throw under pressure felt like a quiet response to the criticism. Every drive he managed to extend showed a level of toughness that teams look for in franchise quarterbacks. Slowly but surely, the conversation around Shedeur Sanders started changing. Instead of asking whether he belonged in the league, more people began asking a different question. What could he do if the offense around him finally stabilized? As the season continued unfolding for the Cleveland Browns, the conversation around Shedeur Sanders started splitting into two completely different realities. On one side, there was the media narrative. On the other, there were the fans actually watching the film. Across sports talk shows, radio segments, and online debates, certain analysts kept repeating the same talking points. Some questioned Sanders' readiness for the NFL. Others wondered whether the offense was simply too complex for a young quarterback. A few commentators even hinted that the struggles of the Browns' offense might be connected to the quarterback himself. But for fans who were closely watching the games, that explanation didn't add up. Every week, supporters were replaying the same snaps that analysts were discussing. Only when they slowed the footage down, the story looked very different. Instead of seeing a quarterback struggling to execute the offense, they kept seeing something else entirely. Protection breakdowns. Missed blocks. Defenders reaching the quarterback far too quickly. In several plays, pass rushers were already closing in before Sanders even had time to complete his drop back. Routes that should have had time to develop were being cut short by immediate pressure. What looked like a quarterback mistake in real time often turned out to be a protection issue when viewed from a different angle. And that disconnect between commentary and reality started frustrating a lot of people. Fans on social media began posting their own film breakdowns. Clips highlighting missed assignments from offensive linemen circulated online. Slow-motion videos showed defenders slipping through gaps that should have been sealed. The more people looked at the tape, the more one question kept appearing. Why was the quarterback taking most of the blame? To many viewers, Shedeur Sanders looked like the player trying to survive the chaos, not the one causing it. Time after time, he was forced to throw under pressure, adjust his footwork mid-play, or release the ball earlier than designed just to avoid getting hit. And yet, despite all of that, he was still completing difficult passes. He was still converting key third downs. He was still keeping drives alive that seemed completely broken. That's when the frustration around the coverage really started building. Some fans felt like the narrative surrounding the quarterback had become easier to repeat than the reality unfolding on the field. Because acknowledging the full situation would require a more complicated conversation. It would mean questioning coaching decisions. It would mean analyzing the instability along the offensive line. It would mean recognizing that the offense itself had structural issues that went far beyond one player. But instead of focusing on those details, many media discussions kept circling back to the same simple headline: was the young quarterback ready? Meanwhile, the evidence sitting on game tape suggested something very different. To a growing number of fans, Shedeur Sanders wasn't the reason the offense struggled. He was the reason it was still functioning at all. Eventually, the instability surrounding the Cleveland Browns offense reached a point where something had to change. Week after week, the same issues kept showing up on film. Protection breakdowns, confusing assignments, drives collapsing before they even had time to develop. That's when offensive coordinator Todd Monken stepped into the spotlight. Instead of making small adjustments or hoping the problems would slowly disappear, Monken made a decision that sent a very clear message throughout the entire organization. He didn't just tweak the offense, he started rebuilding the protection unit from the ground up. For an NFL coaching staff, that's a massive move. Offensive lines depend heavily on chemistry. The 5 players up front need to trust each other completely, understand communication calls instantly, and react as a single unit when defenses shift their formations. Constantly rotating players usually creates even more confusion. But in this case, the coaching staff believed the existing structure simply wasn't working. So Monken began evaluating every position across the line. Players who struggled with assignments were reconsidered. New combinations were tested in practice. Different blocking alignments were introduced to better support the quarterback. Slowly but clearly, the unit in front of Shedeur Sanders started looking very different from the one that had opened the season. This wasn't just a technical adjustment. It was a statement. By rebuilding the protection scheme, Monken signaled that the franchise quarterback wasn't going to be left exposed while chaos continued around him. The message echoed across the locker room: the offense was being reshaped with the quarterback at the center. And players noticed immediately. When a coaching staff takes that level of action, it changes the energy inside the building. Linemen understand that performance matters. Every player becomes aware that positions are earned through execution, not simply given by default. Accountability spreads quickly when leadership takes decisive action. At the same time, the shift also gave Sanders something he hadn't consistently experienced earlier in the season: stability. With improved communication along the offensive line, plays began developing the way they were designed. The pocket held together longer. Protection calls looked clearer. Instead of dodging defenders almost instantly after the snap, the quarterback could finally step into throws with confidence. And once that happened, the difference became visible almost immediately. The offense started moving with rhythm. Routes had time to develop, receivers broke open downfield, passes arrived with sharper timing because the quarterback wasn't forced to rush every decision. Drives that once stalled suddenly began stretching deeper into opposing territory. For fans watching the games, the contrast was striking. Earlier in the season, every snap felt like an escape attempt, with Sanders fighting just to survive the play. Now the offense looked controlled, structured, and far more dangerous. That transformation didn't happen by accident. It came from a deliberate decision by Todd Monken to confront the problem directly instead of letting it continue. By reshaping the protection unit, the Browns' coaching staff made something very clear about their future direction. If the franchise was going to move forward with Shedeur Sanders leading the offense, then the system around him needed to function properly. Because in the NFL, even the most talented quarterback can only do so much without the right support in front of him. Once the protection changes started taking effect, something fascinating began happening inside the offense of the Cleveland Browns. The same plays that once looked chaotic suddenly started looking smooth, controlled, and far more dangerous. For the first time all season, Shedeur Sanders looked like a quarterback who could actually operate the offense the way it was designed. Earlier in the year, every drive felt unpredictable. Fans watching the games never knew when a play might collapse. A clean snap could turn into immediate pressure within seconds. Routes would break open, but the quarterback rarely had enough time to find them. Now the difference was clear. The pocket began holding longer. Protection assignments looked sharper. Linemen communicated more clearly before the snap. Defensive rushers who previously burst through the line suddenly found themselves stalled at the line of scrimmage. That small change created a massive impact. Quarterbacks depend on rhythm. When the pocket stays stable for even 1 or 2 extra seconds, the entire playbook suddenly opens up. Routes can fully develop. Progressions become easier to read. Timing between the quarterback and receivers begins to click. That's exactly what started happening with Sanders. Instead of constantly escaping pressure, he began stepping confidently into the pocket. His footwork looked calmer. His reads became quicker and more precise. Passes started arriving exactly when receivers made their breaks. And when that happens, an offense transforms almost instantly. Third and long situations that once felt impossible suddenly turned into opportunities. Sanders began threading passes between defenders with impressive accuracy. Balls arrived right on time, allowing receivers to catch them in stride and extend drives. Defensive backs started realizing something uncomfortable. Even when coverage looked perfect, the ball might still arrive exactly where it needed to be. Those are the moments that separate ordinary quarterback play from something more special. And as the protection stabilized, Sanders started showing flashes of that higher level. But the impact went far beyond the quarterback position. Receivers began running routes with more confidence because they trusted the timing of the offense. Running backs hit their gaps faster because the line created cleaner lanes. Tight ends found more space in the middle of the field because defenses had to respect the passing attack. Suddenly, the entire offense looked synchronized. Plays that once ended in confusion now unfolded like a coordinated sequence. Each player executed their role and the results started appearing on the scoreboard. For fans watching closely, the contrast between the early season and this new version of the offense was impossible to ignore. Earlier games looked like survival football. Sanders was constantly adjusting on the fly, dodging defenders and trying to salvage broken plays. Now the offense looked like it had structure. The quarterback stood tall in the pocket. The line held its ground. Receivers broke open with proper timing. The entire unit began operating with the rhythm coaches had envisioned from the beginning. And that transformation led to a bigger realization across the fanbase. The earlier chaos wasn't necessarily a reflection of the quarterback's ability. It was a reflection of the environment around him. Once the protection improved and the offense stabilized, the talent of Shedeur Sanders became much easier to see. Throws looked sharper, decision-making looked calmer, drives moved down the field with far less stress. For the Cleveland Browns, this shift represented more than just a few better games. It showed what the offense could become when everything actually worked together. And for the first time all season, it finally looked like Cleveland's offense had found its rhythm. As the dust slowly began to settle around the offense, attention inside the Cleveland Browns organization started shifting toward the future. The season had already revealed several weaknesses across the roster, but it had also revealed something just as important: the potential of Shedeur Sanders when the system around him actually worked. That realization changed the entire conversation about Cleveland's next steps. Instead of simply trying to patch problems week by week, the franchise began looking at the bigger picture. The Browns suddenly found themselves holding significant draft capital, including multiple early-round selections. In the modern NFL, that kind of opportunity can reshape a roster almost overnight. But only if the decisions are made with a clear strategy. And that strategy appeared to be forming around one central question: how do we build the best possible team around our quarterback? For years, Cleveland had struggled with roster instability. Coaching changes, shifting philosophies, and inconsistent player development had created a cycle where the team was constantly rebuilding without ever fully stabilizing. But the emergence of Sanders as a potential franchise quarterback gave the organization something it hadn't consistently had in a long time: a clear foundation. In the NFL, once a team identifies its quarterback, everything else begins to revolve around that position. That means offensive linemen become critical priorities. Protecting the quarterback is the first step in building a sustainable offense. If the pocket collapses constantly, even the most talented passers struggle to operate effectively. The Browns had already seen what happened earlier in the season when protection broke down. Drives stalled, plays collapsed, the offense looked chaotic. But once the line stabilized, the entire unit began functioning differently. Because of that, many analysts believe Cleveland will place heavy emphasis on strengthening the offensive line during the upcoming draft. Young, athletic linemen who can anchor protection schemes and communicate effectively could become major targets for the front office. And the line isn't the only area under evaluation. The receiving core is also likely to be examined closely. While players like Isaiah Bond have shown flashes of explosiveness and potential, the Browns still need receivers who can consistently separate from defenders and maintain precise timing with their quarterback. Timing between a quarterback and his receivers is one of the most important elements in modern offenses. When that chemistry develops, the passing game becomes far more efficient. Routes break exactly when the quarterback expects them to. Throws arrive earlier before defenders can react. That kind of synchronization turns ordinary plays into big gains. At the same time, Cleveland's front office will also have to evaluate whether certain veterans still fit the direction of the team. Players such as Jerry Jeudy have been part of earlier offensive plans that never fully found consistent rhythm. In professional football, those decisions can be difficult, but they are often necessary when a franchise is building toward a new identity. And that identity appears to be centered around Sanders. Beyond the offensive side of the ball, draft strategy also affects the defense. A stronger defense means better field position, more turnovers, and additional opportunities for the offense to control the tempo of the game. When a quarterback doesn't have to constantly chase the scoreboard, the play calling becomes far more balanced. Running plays open up the passing game, play action becomes more effective, the entire offense operates with less pressure. That kind of balance is exactly what Cleveland is trying to build. With multiple draft picks available, the Browns have a rare chance to reshape several areas of the roster at once. Smart decisions could strengthen the offensive line, add playmakers on the outside, and reinforce the defense. But the key will be maintaining a clear focus. Every selection, every free agent signing, and every roster move must answer the same fundamental question: does this help Shedeur Sanders succeed? Because in today's NFL, teams that build properly around their quarterback can remain competitive for years. And if Cleveland executes its draft strategy correctly, the franchise might finally turn a season of chaos into the foundation of something much bigger, the beginning of a new era for the Cleveland Browns. After months of chaos, criticism, and constant questions, one thing has slowly become clear inside the Cleveland Browns organization. The future of the franchise appears to be moving in one direction. Toward Shedeur Sanders. What started as a turbulent season filled with protection breakdowns, locker room tension, and media debate has gradually transformed into something very different. Instead of uncertainty surrounding the quarterback position, the conversation in Cleveland is beginning to revolve around how the team can build the best possible environment for Sanders to succeed. And that shift matters more than anything else. In the NFL, a franchise's long-term direction almost always starts with the quarterback. When teams find a player they believe can lead the offense for years to come, the entire structure of the roster begins adjusting around that player's strengths. Coaches design systems that highlight his abilities. Receivers learn his timing and tendencies. Offensive linemen adapt their protection calls to match how he moves inside the pocket. Even defensive strategy can be influenced by the quarterback's style of play. For Cleveland, that transformation now appears to be underway. Earlier in the season, the offense looked unstable. Protection issues constantly disrupted drives, and critics were quick to question whether Sanders was truly ready for the pressure of professional football. But as the season unfolded, the situation started revealing something important. Even when things around him were falling apart, Sanders kept competing. He absorbed hits behind an inconsistent offensive line. He navigated pressure that arrived far earlier than most quarterbacks are comfortable facing. Yet despite those challenges, he continued stepping into throws, extending plays, and delivering passes that kept the offense alive. That type of resilience doesn't go unnoticed inside an NFL locker room. Teammates see it. Coaches recognize it. And eventually, leadership begins making decisions that reflect it. That's exactly what started happening once the offensive structure in Cleveland began stabilizing. The coaching staff reshaped the protection schemes, new combinations along the line were tested, and the offense slowly started finding rhythm. Once that stability appeared, Sanders looked even more comfortable. His reads became sharper, his footwork looked calmer. The ball started moving down the field with greater precision and confidence. The same quarterback who had been fighting through chaos suddenly looked like a player capable of controlling the entire offense. And when that kind of shift happens, it changes how organizations think about the future. Instead of asking whether the quarterback can carry the team, the focus becomes building the team around him. That process is already beginning to take shape for the Cleveland Browns. With valuable draft picks and roster decisions ahead, the front office now has an opportunity to construct a system that fully supports their young quarterback. That means strengthening the offensive line, adding receivers who can consistently separate from defenders, developing a running game that keeps defenses honest, and building a defense capable of giving the offense favorable field position. When all of those pieces come together, the quarterback gains the freedom to operate at his highest level. For fans in Cleveland, that possibility is what makes this moment so intriguing. For years, the franchise has searched for stability at the most important position in football. Quarterbacks came and went. Expectations rose and fell, and long-term continuity always seemed just out of reach. But now, there are signs that the organization may finally be committing to a clear path forward. A path centered on the young quarterback who continued performing even when the situation around him was far from perfect. Of course, the journey is far from finished. Building a championship-caliber team takes time, patience, and smart decision-making. Draft picks must develop, chemistry within the locker room must grow, systems must evolve as opponents adjust. But every successful era in the NFL begins with a moment when a team recognizes its foundation. For Cleveland, that moment may already be unfolding. Because after everything that happened, the criticism, the instability, the doubts, Shedeur Sanders didn't disappear into the chaos. He rose above it. And if the organization continues building around him the way it appears to be doing now, this season might not just be remembered for the controversy that surrounded it. It might be remembered as the moment the Cleveland Browns officially stepped into a brand new era.